It's finally our Twitter mailbag. That's right. We're moving our Twitter Tuesday to Twitter Thursday. That is coming up next on the Locked On Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. My name's Patricia Traina, and it is Thursday, March 17th. Happy St. Patty's Day. That's right. St. Patrick's Day, St. Patricia's Day. What the heck? I'm going to lay claim to it, even though I'm not Irish and I'm not named Patrick. But hey, people call me Patty, so why can't I lay claim to it? So anyway, thank you so much for making the Locked On Giants podcast your first listen of the day, or if you're watching on YouTube, your first watch of the day. And finally, we are doing the Twitter mailbag. Now, originally, this Twitter mailbag was supposed to run on Tuesday, and because of the free agency news that was coming out, I had to delay the show not once, but twice. So I had actually taped Twitter Tuesday on Monday night. So some of the answers in the pod might be a little outdated. And what I did was in post editing, I went back and I gave you updated information relevant to what has since happened. But for the most part, the questions are still current. The answers should still be okay. So I hope you'll check it out. I want to thank everybody for sending in questions. We had something like, I want to say 15 questions in total. So it was a really fun episode for me to do, and I'm finally glad to get it out because I've been sitting on this episode obviously for a couple of days now. And before I get into the questions, just a quick note, I'm going to touch base with Bobby Skinner of Talking Giants on Thursday for Friday's show. So we're going to get you caught up on all things Giants. We're going to talk about the moves that have been made so far, the fits, how this is going to affect the draft. Always nice to get a different perspective in on how things are shaping up for the Giants. So that is the plan for Friday's show. And then we'll take you right into the weekend. So with that said, let's hop right in to Twitter Thursday. All right, we got lots to get to today, so let's jump right in. We're going to start off with our Twitter questions. And up first, we hear from Michael B.L. Wants to know about Saquon Barkley. Does he stay or does he go? Thanks for the question, Michael. I think Saquon is probably going to stay. I mean, I don't think there's a big market for him. And the early impression I'm getting from the Giants management and how they're doing business is they're not going to simply settle just for the sake of moving a guy. Now, if they move Saquon, obviously they can save $7.2 million on the cap. But if they don't move him, they'll just have an extra weapon for Daniel Jones on that offense. Now, if they get a sweetheart of an offer, what we call a Godfather offer, they'll move them. But I don't think the Giants are going to move Saquon Barkley just for the sake of moving him. I just don't see that happening, unfortunately. So thank you for that question. All right, let's go to Peter, who wants to know what's the hold up on the Berry move. I'm assuming you mean James Bradberry. And do you think Ryan, assuming, again, Logan Ryan for 7th is doable? Okay, Peter, I wrote an article actually on the James Bradberry holdup. It's on Giants Country. I'll put the link to the show notes, or in the show notes, but just in a nutshell, kind of piggybacking off the answer that I just gave, the Giants aren't going to just give guys away for a song and a dance. They want great value for it. And right now, time is on the Giants' side. So they don't have to trade Bradberry right away. They have some money to do, minor signings. I think at some point Bradberry will be moved. I could even see it happening over the draft weekend for a team that's desperate to get a cornerback and maybe doesn't get the quality cornerback that they're looking for. So, patience would be what I would preach to you here. As far as Logan Ryan for a 7th round pick, is that doable? Yeah, I suppose it's doable, but does it make sense is the question to ask. And I don't think it makes sense. I think the Giants are going to keep Ryan for one more year. And then after this year, maybe look to see if they can move him. They're not going to save that much money if they move him now. So I don't think it makes that much sense, if I'm being honest with you. Plus, let's see, in the safety, that would leave them with a hole in the safety. You would have Xavier McKinney. You would have Julian Love. If you trade Ryan, I think that leaves a big hole. All right. Now, there's no guarantee that you're going to draft like a Kyle Hamilton. So I don't know. I just don't see it happening this year. I'd be very surprised if the Giants move Logan Ryan in a trade this year. I think next year is probably a better, time frame, if you will, to look for that. So thanks for that question. All right. Next, we hear from Dave NY 1979. Will we see a trade today to clear up space, or are they waiting until the next financial year begins? And is there a benefit to waiting? All right, that question was received on Monday, by the way, for timing purposes. Dave, thank you for the question. Again, there is no rush to do a trade right now for the reasons that I just stated. When you talk about the next financial year, that actually starts on Wednesday, so we're not that far off. And any trades or moves made now anyway are for the next financial year, just to clarify that up. Is there a benefit to waiting? Yes. The benefit, as I've mentioned, is that you don't get fleeced in a potential trade. So, if you're the Giants, you kind of wait, I think, until the market settles down a little bit. See who gets what, who might need what. I mean, that would be the prudent way to do it. The Giants are going to need upwards of about $12 million to sign their rookie class. All right. That can be the James Bradbury money. You don't need it right now. Do you need some more money? Would you like to have some more money? Absolutely. But what I think is going to happen is the Giants are going to do what's called a swap for a swap, meaning that for every player they want to sign, that they feel that they have to have, you're going to find out that somebody redid their contract, or maybe somebody gets cut. It's not going to be a straight, okay, we have $10 million worth of cap space, so we're going to just spend it. It's going to be a swap for a swap. That's what I think is going to happen with the Giants, at least early on here in free agency. So thanks for that question, Dave. Let's go now to Rocky Bullwinkle, who again asks if the Giants will trade Saquon Barkley this year, let him play until the trade deadline, or let him play out the year. You know what, Rocky? I would probably say that unless the Giants get a good deal for Barkley, at least a 3rd round pick, which is what I think he would bring in a comp pick if all things were equal, I don't know now that the Giants will trade him. I don't think they should for anything less than a 3rd round pick, and maybe throw in a conditional 5th that becomes a 4th with play time or certain incentives. But I could see the Giants now potentially keeping him. I don't agree with that. I would look to move him now, especially if he is not part of the long-term plans. But I'm guessing, right, to be honest with you, that he is not part of the long-term plans. Certainly not going to get a big contract. I just don't see that happening. I think that would just be cap suicide if you're the Giants. So my guess is Barkley, if he stays healthy, will play out the year, but we'll see. I know there was some chatter about potentially trading him. I don't think the market was robust enough for the Giants to say, oh yeah, we've got to move this guy. But we'll see what happens as the year goes on. So thanks for that question, Rocky. All right, up next, Nico Risen asks, it would be nice if you could dive in a bit on how exactly comp picks work and what we could expect the Giants to get for players like Evan Ingram, Jabril Peppers, and maybe Hernandez. All right, Nico, thank you for that question. I'm going to be honest with you. I do not know the exact formula for comp picks. What I do know is that it is based on how many free agents the Giants sign versus how many they lose, what the free agents they sign for, what their contracts look like, what the free agents they lose sign for. So I don't know the exact formula. It was never published by the NFL Management Council. I know Nick over at Over the Cap knows that formula, or has come pretty close to predicting that formula. In studying it, I can kind of take guesses, but I'd have to see what kind of contracts Evan got, Jabril got, Will Hernandez got, and then again, see what the Giants are signing. So far, as I record this, the Giants have only re-signed CJ Board, which was one of their own, and they added Robert Foster. So that's really not going to move the needle too much on the Giants side. But let's see what happens kind of early right now for that question. But as far as the formula, again, I have to see who signs what, but I don't know the exact formula. I don't think a lot of people do, because it's always been kept a secret for some reason. I don't know why. I mean, I don't know what the big deal is, but that's what the NFL Management Council has decided to do. So it is what it is. All right, Giant fans, more coming up on today's Locked on Giants podcast. But first, it's that time of year again as college basketball's tournament, March Madness, is finally upon us. And from all the latest odds, contests, and player props, BetOnline remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sporting wagering information needs, including live betting and your favorite Vegas casino games. Head on over to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and the action. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to the Locked on Giants podcast, Twitter Tuesday. I am Patricia Traina, your host, and I'm answering your questions. We have over a dozen questions today, so I'm going to get through all of those questions. Now, if your question was sent in after I tape this podcast, don't worry, I'll hold it for next week, assuming that it's still applicable. And if not, then what I'll do is I'll just pick it up and answer it in the Giants Country mailbag that I publish every Saturday. So either way, I gotcha. I mean, unless the question answers itself between now and the time I get to the Giants Country mailbag. So always looking out for you guys, and appreciate you guys for listening to the podcast and for the feedback and everything. All right, let's get back to your questions. Charu TK. Why did the Giants have fifth pick in round 1, the 4th pick in round 2, and the 3rd pick in round 3? What accounts for the variance? Ooh, that's a good question. I don't know. The only thing I can think of is that maybe you're looking at a different, I don't know what draft order you're looking at, but you also have to remember that maybe some draft picks or some draft orders are forecasting comp picks that are still to be announced. So if that's the case, that's what would account for the variance. That and any kind of, any situations where you have forfeited picks, that would kind of move everything up a little bit. So comp picks and forfeited picks would move would account for the variance. But no, that's a great question, and I'm glad you asked that question. So that would be my guess, is that somebody just accounted for the comp picks. All right, next question comes from Brandon Olson. Brandon, what's up, my man? Brandon's one of our Locked On hosts. He does college ranks. So, all right. So Brandon asks, let's say the Giants go edge and tackle in any order at 5 and 7. What should the approach for the rest of the draft look like? Wow. Brandon, I'm going to say somewhere in there, I'm going to want a tight end, maybe like from round 3 onward. Round 2, gosh, this is going to be hard because I would need to know who's on the board. I can't just pick a position. Obviously they need a tight end. They're going to need a running back. And an interior offensive lineman, but I got to know who's on the board, Brandon. It's really tough for me to say, do this, do that. I would say, if like a Tyler Linderbaum somehow falls to round 2, I would say grab him, depending on what they do in free agency, of course. But yeah, it's really going to depend on who's on the board. But I would say double dip at least in the offensive line for sure. You probably want to get a tight end, a running back, a defensive lineman for depth. You're probably going to want to get another cornerback, I would think. Potentially, you might want to get another inside linebacker, edge rusher. We've got that covered, but you can never have too many of those. So just kind of tricky. I'm going to be honest with you that is a tricky question without knowing specific names. So, but hopefully, that at least, I tried to answer it. So, hopefully that helps. So, all right, let's see who we have next. Kerry Dovey, my man Kerry, wants to know, Ryan Jensen signed a 3-year, $39 million contract with 2 affordable years and a measly $4 million cap hit this year. Should we expect Shane to be this creative and smart to bring in one big young offensive line acquisition for 5 years, or to fill every position short term? You know what, Kerry, I did a piece on the differences between what the Bills do and what the Giants have done with the salary cap. And I don't recall the Bills doing something similar with voidable years, because all voidable years will do is push money down the road, kick the can down the road. And I don't get the sense that the Giants want to do that. So they're almost better off front loading as much of the money as possible in the first year and then having minimal money in the second year, no guaranteed money. So that said, I guess they could do it once in a while, but I wouldn't advocate doing it for every single position, because again, you are kicking dead money down the road. That's what they did with Solder. That's what they have in Bradbury's contract. That's what they're going to have in Shepard's contract. And I think you got to let all that kind of, clear out before you start doing that again and adding new potential dead money down the road. So that's how I would approach that. All right, up next, we hear from Antoine. Do you think the Giants will trade Darius Slayton? I wouldn't say that's off the table, but if they're going to move him, I wonder if they're not going to, I wonder if they're going to wait on that. Maybe wait till the draft. That would be my guess, is to wait for the draft to move him. You could save about, I think it's like 2.5 million or something like that. And you could get something back for him potentially, but yeah, I could see that happening. I don't know that it will, but I could certainly see that happening. Yeah. All right. Up next, we hear from Danielle Wallace. If Daniel Jones plays really well and the Giants are still picking in the 10 to 20 range, do you see them trading up for a quarterback in 2023? No. Why would you? If Daniel Jones has a breakout year, and they re-sign him to big money, why would you trade up to get a quarterback in 2023? That doesn't really make sense, Daniel. If they have the assets and they want to trade up to get an edge rusher or, another position that maybe has a stud at it, that's what I could see them doing, but not a quarterback. That doesn't really make sense, to be honest with you. So, but thanks for the question, though. All right, Giant fans, we have a few more questions still to go here on the Twitter Tuesday edition of the Locked On Giants podcast. Those are coming at you next. All right, Giant fans, we have more coming up on today's Locked On Giants podcast. But first, with the ever-increasing number of makes and models, there's only one place to find what you need quickly for your car or truck, and that's at Rock Auto. Rock Auto is a family business with over 20 years offering competitive pricing on thousands of parts for every make, model, and manufacturer. Check out their website and don't forget to write Locked On in their How Did You Hear About Us box so that they know we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, and they ship direct to your door. all the parts your car or truck will ever need. That's rockauto.com. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. Patricia Traina here with you on Twitter Tuesday. We are answering your questions. We have about 5 or so left in this edition. And again, don't worry if your question didn't get answered. It means I got it after I taped, or it went to, you didn't tag it, or I should say, or you didn't tag it, Ask P Train, or you might have sent it to Giants Country. But again, I can pick up any questions that came in late on Giants Country, which you will want to check out the mailbag every Saturday morning that I post. So there's always that. So anyway, let's get back to your questions. Now we're going to move to the email questions. This coming in from Larry S., who writes, I think Kyle Hamilton could still be there for the Giants at 5 or 7. Isn't he a free safety? Would he and McKinney work well in the same secondary? You know what, Larry? If Kyle Hamilton is available, I can make a case for drafting him. I would not be upset if they drafted him if both of the tackles were off the board and if Thibodeau wasn't there. I can make a case for Hamilton. He's a tremendous athlete. And, you got to look ahead. I always tell people this. You got to kind of look ahead as well. I don't think Logan Ryan is going to be on this team in 2023. Jabril Peppers, I don't see the Giants re-signing him. So right now, who are your 3 safeties? You've got Ryan, you've got McKinney, and you've got Julian Love. And Julian Love is entering the final year of his deal too. So that's a position you might want to start adding depth to now, and just so you're not caught shorthanded, I would think. So yeah, I can see Kyle Hamilton maybe at 5 or at 7 if he falls down there, depending again on what happens in the first few rounds, the first few slots there. So thanks for that question. All right, Peter M puts forth a scenario. So let's put this one up here. What are your thoughts on this scenario? Sign recently cut Bills left guard John Feliciano, re-sign Billy Price, sign cheaper free agents like Ike Brettinger, I think, or Boetinger it should be, not Brettinger, or Bradley Bozeman, possibly. Okay, right off the bat, Peter, I don't see that happening. Bozeman, I don't think is going to come cheap. I don't think Darrell Williams is going to come cheap. They don't have enough money to do all this. So I just don't see this scenario playing out. I mean, it's a nice scenario and I would have no problem with it if they had money. But the problem with this, Peter, is they don't have the money to do this. So I'm sorry, I can't see it happening. I mean, of the things you mentioned, could I see them re-signing Billy Price? Possibly. But I also would like to see them upgrade. I mean, if they could get Bradley Bozeman and if they have to spend a little bit more to get him, I'd be fine with that. Bradley Bozeman, he's been, a target of mine for a few weeks now. So I'd be fine with that. Darrell Williams, again, if you got to look at the draft, okay? And here's the thing, okay? So Jacksonville put the franchise tag on Cam Robinson. So they're probably going to take a pass rusher. The Jets just signed Laken Tomlinson, who I know is a guard, but that's probably going to preclude them from taking an offensive lineman when they're on the clock at 4. So there's a pretty good chance, I would say, that the Giants might, just might, get one of the 2 top offensive tackles, either Ike Ekwonu or Evan Neal. And if one of those, if I'm the Giants and I feel one of those guys is going to be there, I might not go crazy with re-signing offensive linemen or signings, got veterans. I might just say, you know what, I'm going to take an interior guy, call it a day, and then take my chances with the draft. So that's how I could see that playing out. But otherwise, again, if the Giants had money, I would have no problem with your scenario, Peter. I think it's a pretty good one, but they just don't have the money to do it. So, all right, up next, Sean K. I'm noticing a lot of these post-combine mock drafts changing a whole lot at the top. Generally, what fast riser feels legit to you and what feels like fool's gold? All right, let me answer that part first, Sean. Too soon to tell. I want to see pro day results. I want to be able to look back at some of the film and see if the film matches up. And, I'll cite something that Coach Gene Clemens said on the show last week. When I asked him about the speed we were seeing and how all of a sudden we're seeing all the speed, but, now do you have to go back and look at the tape and say, well, where was the speed on film? Was it always there, or was it just because, they installed a new turf at Lucas Oil Stadium? So that I would need to find out. Now, you also asked about Trayvon Walker routinely being ranked, selected ahead of Kayvon Thibodeau. Is it just recency bias? Do you think scouts around the league have been thinking that way for a while, and the fans or media just catching up? Again, I think we've got to go through the rest of the process. I mean, one thing I will tell you, Sean, is that a lot of times what the media and the fans perceive for the draft isn't necessarily reflected in the NFL community. I've seen that many times where guys, feel that this player should be a top 10 pick and the player falls to the 20s or even into the second round. It's just how, things go. Free agency, I think, is going to help shape some of this stuff because, obviously a team that needs a pass rusher, if they go and they sign a pass rusher, well, maybe now they don't need a pass rusher. Maybe they say, okay, we addressed this. Maybe now we need to get a wide receiver. So there's a lot of different variables here. And I just think it's kind of hard right now to sort through what's legit and what's fool's gold. And the big thing, like I said, is based on what the combine results were, to go back, watch the film, verify what you see on film as being legit. Maybe the guy just got lucky. Maybe, like I said, because it was a faster turf. It could be any number of reasons. So that's where I think the Giants have to, go back and look and do some extra homework. All the teams, actually. So thanks for that question, Sean. Appreciate you. All right. Next, we hear from, Joseph D., who writes, just got done listening to your great 2-hour podcast. That, of course, being the podcast I did last week with The Entertainer, 2-hour roster rebuild program. If you haven't checked it, please check it out. That was kind of a fun podcast. So Joseph writes, the thing that struck me the most is when you and Chris commented on not drafting a punter until at least the 6th round, even for a great punter. As much as I understand the need to draft picks, why wouldn't you want to draft a true weapon that could somehow neutralize a good team and be a true weapon for many years to come? Very simply, Joseph, the Giants have a lot of needs. And unless that punter was the next Ray guy, I'm not drafting a punter, early. I'm just not doing it. As a matter of fact, I think the last time the Giants drafted a punter high was when they drafted Brad Maynard in the 3rd round. All right. And he was pretty good for them. The Giants have too many needs. And considering how many times a game a punter plays, and I get it. Yes, he can flip the field, but you know what? Coverage is a big part of that too. The coverage and the punter work hand in hand. So I'm sorry. I'm just not drafting a punter very high, if at all. I mean, there's a reason why punters don't get drafted very often, and that's probably it. So that hopefully that answers your question why I'm not putting a higher premium on punters. So, all right, we have one more question, it looks like. So let me pull that up. Dave T. He writes, given Saquon's injury record, we'll need someone who can contribute from the get-go if necessary. However, our salary cap issues are going to limit options, etc. With that in mind, are there any affordable free agent running backs out there you think would be a good fit? And do you have your eye on any running backs in this year's draft? Okay, Dave, my guess is the Giants, they're going to probably pick up. They signed, I think, I want to say it was Antonio Williams. I know they signed a running back that had been with the Bills. I can maybe see them picking up a guy in the draft. Joe Shane was part of a Bills front office that really didn't put a high priority on on drafting a running back. So yeah, as far as names, I don't think I have any names that I've zeroed in on, because to be honest with you, I've been looking more at the tight end, offensive line, edge rusher group than I have running back. But yeah, I would feel better if the Giants picked up a veteran running back, because one of the things with the young running backs coming out of the draft is they are not always strong pass protectors. They have to build that skill up. So I would want somebody who was a good pass protector, because Saquon Barkley. Let's be honest. That's not been a one of his better skills. He can do it. He's willing, but is he good at it? Probably not as good as maybe Devonta Booker was. I do think they're going to add an affordable guy to compete, but I don't think you could go crazy there. I mean, I know what you're saying with the injury history of Saquon and how you want to have a solid number two behind him. But if I'm the Giants, I think I'm going to probably look to the draft to ultimately, get that number two up to speed with pass pro and all that stuff. I'm not going to go crazy to spend on a veteran. You've got guys that can be veterans. Like I said, they signed the kid Williams, who had been with Buffalo. They're obviously familiar with him, and just kind of go from there and see what you get. But yeah, I don't think running back is going to be a premium position for the Giants at all. So